Hi, my name's Joe Sear-Myles. I am an actor based in London. You can follow me on Instagram, Joe Sear-Myles, all one word, Joesermyles. Follow me on Instagram and you can see all of the things that I've been working on. I do some of my own projects as well. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel. I believe it's the same thing, Joe Sear-Myles, where you can see Amnesiac, short film that I've been working on. And yeah, hope you guys enjoy the podcast. Thanks for having me on. What anybody at this point? Well, no, I think I mean, Leo is the obvious answer. He's the one that that would be, I could die the next day and I will feel fine.
But the thing is, do you have I think you do, but do you believe you have the chops for that yet? To be co-lead with somebody like Leo or Anthony or somebody like that?
100%. Well, I've got to find my own way. I've got to find my own way, and that's the thing that I need to focus on at the moment. And all of those good things, they will come. And but the thing that I want to do right now in my career is be surprised by it. I want to appreciate those little moments. But I think if that in answer to answer your question, I'd love to work with Tarantino. I think his films just completely mesmerized me in a way that nobody else can. He's kind of like cemented his stature as the grandfather of some of really good quality films. So Tarantino, Christopher Nolan, just because of Inception. I mean, even Tenet, I mean, it has its shortcomings, but that's a brilliant film. And then there's other things that I'd like to do as well. But I have more ideas for like different projects, to be honest with you. So one question that somebody's asked me recently is, if there's one role that you'd like to do, what would it be? And oddly, it's kind of gravitated towards musical orientated characters. So anything to do with Oasis, the Gallagher brothers, I'd love to do something like that. And then there's another one, and I always forget who it is. It will come back to me. But yes, so stuff like that is very good. But in terms of working with new people, I'd love to work with Simon Pegg. Simon Pegg and Nick Frost would be a laugh. Or I'd like to be Doctor Who. Doctor Who is
really Doctor Who. What about Sherlock Holmes then?
Oh, Sherlock Holmes is too smart for me. I need to improve my IQ considerably to be able to do that. Maybe I should get into my mind palace and start there. But no, I could see myself playing that. I think I could. I think as an actor, you kind of have to just be like, yeah, do you know what? I could do that. Why not?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So, but Doctor Who is definitely something that I'd like to do.
Yeah. Consider, so if you win the lottery, right? Like you get your druthers, you go out to Hollywood, you make it big. Are you ready for that lifestyle? Are you ready for the fame?
Do you know what? I don't know. That's something I'll have to see. I mean, I think I'd like to kind of Keanu Reeves it a little bit and just kind of live off £3 meal deals and have a poxy little flat in Brixton or something like that. That I think as long as I can care for the people around me and the people that believe in me, that's my main thing. I think the one thing that a lot of creatives have is, when will I start getting paid for this sort of stuff? And as soon as and I say to people who want to be famous, I say, if you're getting into this business and you want to be famous, you're kind of doing it for the wrong reason.
That's right.
You have to do it because of you get something from it that isn't money, that isn't fame, that isn't success. That's the things that you get later on down the line. So for me, as an actor, I'm always struggling for cash. So just to be able to get paid for the stuff that I'm doing, and I've been paid recently for some of the stuff that I'm doing, that's an honor in itself, really. And that's something that if you had asked me that 5 years ago, I would have said, yeah, 100%, I'll do that. Do you know, I've asked myself that question about fame, and I don't feel like I am ready for it. But that's because I haven't gotten to that place yet. So fingers crossed.
Are there roles that you won't play?
Ooh, are there roles that I would not play? Are there roles that I would not? I've actually never asked myself that question. I think maybe not a paedophile. That would be too far,
Right.
because that would take a lot for me to be able to do that. That would just be weird. And I love kids as well. Actually, no, wait, I shouldn't say that. But anyway, yeah. So basically that, I mean, I don't know. I don't ever want to limit myself.
No, I absolutely understand. I asked another gentleman that question, and he's Muslim. So he was like, he wouldn't do a commercial that involved alcohol. He wouldn't do one that involved gambling, you know, but for that reason. Yeah. But for those reasons. Yeah.
Of course. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, that's a really difficult question to answer. And it shouldn't be a difficult question, but it is.
Well, but I'm sure though, once you get up and running and you are a household name, there will be parts that you won't play. Like Simon Cowell. Like Simon Cowell at the height of his fame. I don't know if he's still as famous, but he wouldn't do Viagra commercials and stuff like that. There were a lot of things that he wouldn't do gambling commercials either. He's like, I don't do that, so I'm not going to do that.
Well, another example that reminded me of that, not exactly Viagra adverts. I don't know what adverts you're watching. Anyway, no, sorry, that was quite rude. But so like stuff like awkward commercials and stuff like that, like Joey Tribbiani in Friends, he's got that lipstick on. I mean, that's just genius.
Yeah.
And I think the main reason why I wouldn't say no to that is because I can look back at it and I'd go, oh, that's funny. I can kind of take the mickey out of myself a little bit.
Yeah.
But obviously with the right project, I'd have to say yes. I mean, stylistically, there are certain things that I wouldn't necessarily like to do, like anything really poetic that you have to really dig for the meaning to get. When it's something that's, a theatre play specifically, that's very difficult to do because you have to unpick a lot. But if it's a film, then you can kind of replicate that a little bit, which makes it slightly easier. And I've done non-naturalistic stuff before, so like very abstract stuff, which has its own meaning, and people love doing that sort of thing. I've done my own sort of stuff with that, but that's something I struggle with. But I'd always like to. I would never say no to anything as long as it's the right project, or if it's something that I go back to in the future. That's something that always excites me, to be able to revisit characters. And I've even got something maybe in the works where I'm reprising a role, which is something that I never expected to do. So that's fun. But no, I don't. I don't have an answer to that last question. So you'll have to. I'll apologize for that.
No, absolutely. Has things been fun this far? Like, has the journey been fun?
Yes, the journey has been fun, but it's been hard. I would like to say I probably wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my mum. My parents split up when I was very young, and for them both to be able to bring me up, I think I've realized how hard that is now that I'm 24. I mean, that's not very old, but I think I'm starting to get a grips with it. It's been fun, this journey, but it's been difficult. And that's the thing when you said about, being famous and stuff. I want to be able to look after my mum when she gets older and look after my dad when he gets older. That's the biggest thing for me. I just want to make them proud. But I think, that I'm getting all emotional now just thinking about it. But yeah, I'd like to sort things out for my mum.
If you could go back in time, would you change anything about your acting career? Would you have started sooner? Would you? I guess maybe you would have gone to drama school.
Yeah, I don't think I would have gone to drama school. I think I'm happy I didn't, in any way, because I feel like now I'm ready. So I don't really regret that. One thing I do regret is when I was studying my BTEC, I was a bit cocky and a bit egotistical. And I think I would have done that very differently. I would have been a little bit more open and a little bit more patient with people and patient with myself. I think a lot of the things that people have when they want to get into this sort of stuff is they really take themselves seriously. And I think at that point in my life, I took myself really seriously, too seriously, to the point where, you know, people couldn't really warm to me. And I think there is a very intense nature about myself. And I think, you know, someone said that to me recently. They said, you know, you're a very intense guy, but that lends itself to the work that you do. And even when he said that, I kind of felt like, you know, I wish I wasn't as intense as I am, or emotionally sensitive. I feel like that would have changed a few things, but I am who I am, man. I have to accept that sooner or later. And as long as I'm not harming anybody, as long as I'm, you know, keeping the peace, I don't feel like I have many regrets right now. But yeah, definitely not get caught up in my own ego. That's something that I would have liked to have done earlier on. And this is getting really ridiculous. But but when I was younger, I wish I wasn't as shy. But I think, again, that lends itself to what I'm like now, where I'm getting more confident and I trust myself a little bit more. But I wish I wasn't as shy, because I think then I would have been able to meet more people and stuff like that. I'm at a stage in my life where I want to meet as many people as I can and just talk to people and hear their stories and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Between a London actor and an LA actor, like, is there any difference? Or because it seems to be this difference. There's like this unspoken thing that people who are trained in London are trained very well, and the people in LA, not so much.
Well, I don't know. I mean, like I said, like I've never really met a lot of American actors, but from what I have done over like Zoom calls and auditions and stuff like that, I find at least that Americans, and I listen to a lot of podcasts, so I'm a massive fan of Joe Rogan's podcast and stuff like that. They're a lot more outspoken and they have a lot of stories to tell. Whereas there's a common trope or a common joke that at least comedians have, is that when you're in London and you introduce one of your friends to somebody else, it's like, oh yeah, this is my friend. He's a really good mate of mine, but he's also a bit of a dick. You know, it's always a bit of a disclaimer that, you know, there's something underlying to it, or, you know, just to kind of get them down to that level. And I think that's kind of the main difference, at least for me. But I think I'd like to think of it that at least with actors in London, it's more a case that everyone's sort of on the same level and everyone likes to be on that level. Whereas I can imagine it being in America, where it's quite competitive. There are certain things that you must meet in order to get where you want to be, if that makes sense. But I think that's more an idealistic view that I put in comparison to America, in comparison to here as well.
Yeah. Well, how you've done theater, right?
I started off mainly doing theater, yeah.
And what's that life like?
It's cool. It's quite I don't know, personally, I sometimes struggle to be able to be around a lot of creatives, especially socially. I have quite a small social battery, I think, but I always love talking to creatives and stuff like that, but I find it difficult to really relax it with other creatives. I think that probably says more about me than it does about anybody else. But
no, I think you're speaking truth, man. I think I'm from that same space,
right?
Just kind of dabbling in filmmaking and doing this podcast and interviewing people. It's difficult for me to be with creatives as well. I mean, I can give you my spiel, but I'll hear your spiel first, as why you think it's a bit difficult for you to be around other creatives.
Well, because I think it's just it's a very competitive atmosphere, and so when you have that, there's always this sort of underlying thing where you're not quite sure how far you can trust people. And the reason why I got into acting in the first place was because I wanted to figure out who I was. And I think a lot of what I get from acting is that it's kind of vice versa. So you can put all of yourself into a character, and then whatever you get back, you can infer in your own life. And that's been my process for a lot of what I've done. So I find it quite difficult to be able to separate myself from a character and to be my own person. I think that's whenever someone says, "Oh, what's your goal?" or what's whatever, what do you want to accomplish? I try not to think of it like that. I try and think of it that I am the person that I am now, and that I'm trying to obtain certain things along the way, but I don't want it to be particular. And I think sometimes the thing with creatives is that they can kind of get lost in that in a way, and a lot of actors, a lot of creatives take things personally because there's a lot of rejection and stuff like that. So I find the best thing for me is to be distant from the characters that I try and create, and try and be as authentic as I can, because in that way you're more authentic to the work. And just I've always been quite a shy person, and so yeah, it's difficult, but I enjoy it. It's not something that I find is necessarily a burden, but it's difficult. I'm young. I know I am. I lack a lot of experience, but that's why I got into acting, was because I wanted to push myself. I wanted to be brave, and I wanted to figure out who I could be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but if you do a comparison to when you first started and to who you are now, is there like a massive change? Like the change, is it significant? Is it significant growth?
I think so. Yeah, at least I think the most formative part of my development as an actor was probably when I went to Chicken Shed, which was I did a BTEC there, because I wasn't the most academic of students, but as soon as I went to Chicken Shed, I was among a lot of creatives and actors who were hungry for it, and it wasn't competitive, but it was a very inclusive environment. And that's where I really saw a change in me. I realized, oh wait, if I want to seriously do this, then I have to be able to be in that environment as much as I can. And I hadn't been around people like that before. But I think for me, I've become more confident since going to university as well. That's been a big thing for me. So I think there is a difference in me a little bit, but I try not to think about it too much. I don't want me to get lost in my ego and stuff like that. I think that's something that can really get in the way of your work, and it can get in the way of, stuff like this whenever you talk to people and stuff. I don't necessarily like to big myself up quite a lot. And that means that I'm more free to kind of do whatever it is that I really want to do, if that makes sense.
Well, it makes sense, but I guess what I guess I would ask is, like, so then what are you using as benchmarks? Like, how are you holding yourself accountable if you're not kind of sort of keeping score?
Well, it depends. It depends that every single time on the different project. I mean, I've been in a lot of theatre plays where I played ensemble characters, and that's great. But I think the thing that I really want is to be able to get fully fledged characters. That's something that at this current stage in my career, that's what I really want to do. And hopefully you get to see that in Amnesiac and Psychopath, 2 new films I've got coming out. So yeah, that's kind of it for me, really. I don't like thinking of it being benchmarks I need to set myself, and if I don't get there, then I'm considered a failure. I think Cillian Murphy said you shouldn't judge any of what you've acted in until you're 40, and I felt that was very humbling for someone of his character and his stature in acting, and I like to kind of replicate that as much as I can.
Absolutely. So when did it all start for you? Like, when did you get the bug?
So I was, like I said, I was never the most academic of students, but during my GCSEs, when I was at secondary school, before I went to study at Chicken Shed, I saw Good Will Hunting. I don't know whether you've seen it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a masterpiece.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, very nice. So as soon as I saw that, I thought that's what I want to do. And once I knew that Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, they wrote that when they were a similar age to me. I think I was a teenager and they were in their early 20s. I thought, if they can do it, well, surely I can do it. And I saw that film 2 weeks before I was going to perform a monologue. And the difference with the monologue is you're left bare. It's only you on stage. You can't really rely on somebody else. And I was very scared of that. And I saw that film and I thought, if I can replicate that a little bit, then it will be okay. And I remember doing the monologue, and I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't like a standout performer at that stage. And then when I did it and I did the performance, I was in my own completely different world than what I had than what I was already. And even when I finished, the teacher went, "Oh, I didn't realize that you could do that." But it wasn't like an excitement. It was more, I think she kind of felt gutted in a way, because I think she enjoyed the performance, and I think she wanted to work with me a little bit more. And I wasn't. I was a very shy person, so I never really had that discussion with her. And then once I realized that, I was like, okay, so I'm good at this then. So surely I can progress in this somewhat. And then it all kind of stemmed from there. But if I look even further back than that, I think my dad was a very big influence on me, because he's very into his TV, very into his films, stuff like Magnificent Seven and Star Wars and stuff like that, and even stuff like Blackadder. We would always quote different things from different films and music and stuff like that, and it was all kind of intertwined. And it gave me a deeper sense of meaning, or it just gave me the freedom to be who I wanted to be. And I didn't think I got that from any of the other subjects that I was doing at school. So I think that's where it all started, really.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you name Good Will Hunting, because I often have this discussion with actors and with filmmakers in general. And I ask them, like, what do you think is the most important component to a great film? Is it acting? Is it the plot? Is it cinematography? And I ask the person to choose, or, I'll even give them the option is if all things are equal. But in my mind, Good Will Hunting, the reason why that's a masterpiece is because of the acting.
I think you're 100% right on that. But I was watching the Hollywood Reporter recently. They do their roundtables where they get a lot of famous actors and stuff like that. And Gary Oldman said it takes one thing for a production to fail. And in answer to your question, I don't think that there's one singular thing that holds up something. I mean, if you look at stuff like, The Godfather, the writing in that is incredible. The direction's incredible. The acting's incredible. So it's less one thing in particular. It's more a collective and a chemistry that comes together. That's when something is good. You feel it in the air. There's a difference there. But it takes one thing for it to fall, I think, sometimes, or not necessarily to fall, but to be able to accommodate for that in a collaborative way. That's something that I think, you don't see a lot in modern day society. We're not very inclusive. We don't talk a lot. There's not a lot of collaboration there. At least that's what I've found. And so that having that space, I think, is really important. So in answer to your question, I think I don't think that there's any one demographic of things that have to make something good. And I learned that when I was at uni, because I didn't go to drama school because I didn't think I was good enough. And I didn't have the life experience, I think, that was required. And when I went to uni, you could do performing, but it catered to other things like lighting and props and set design and costume, stuff that I had never thought of before. And when I went to uni and I realized that was something that hadn't really crossed my mind, I realized that what Gary Oldman said, I think, is true. It takes a lot. It's at least just in terms of acting, it takes a lot to be able to release that emotion and be brave enough to be like, do you know what? I've prepared so much for this. If it's not a good performance, somebody will get a little moment. And that moment is everything to me. Even if I'm oblivious to it, that's good enough. Because I've had it before when I feel like I've had good performances and people have come up to me and said, oh, that bit didn't work. and I'd always listen to them and I'd be like, okay, well, why does that not make sense? And then I've had it before where I've had a bad performance and somebody said, oh, what you did was really good, it really spoke to me. And then once you hear both of those stories, you're like, well, then how do I know how good it is until the ending? And I think that's the thing that I try and look for, are those little authentic moments where you know you're doing good work, where you know something is people are gravitating towards that. And that's how good art can become great art, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Do you think you're a step behind by not going to drama school?
At least when I started, I didn't necessarily feel that way. As I got into my second and third year at university, I definitely felt that way for sure. But that was because I was comparing myself to other people. Whereas now I'm about to start going to a part-time drama school, Identity. I think they're reasonably big in America, and they're big here as well. John Boyega went there, and that's a massive privilege. That's something that I think is going to be a key learning experience for me. So I'm excited for that. It starts in September, so a little bit nervous, but I'll be right.
Well, is acting hard? Like, do you find it like you have to have some sort of talent in order to be an actor?
That's a complicated question, which I like. I think anybody can act, to be honest. But if you asked anybody to do it, it would take a certain amount of bravery to be able to do it.
Absolutely.
I don't necessarily feel like I'm a step behind. I feel like whenever I get a new script, the thing that I always try and do is see if the emotion comes naturally to me. I've always been quite an emotional person, and I think that lends itself to the craft that I'm trying to do. But I think anybody can act, to be honest. I mean, there are actors out there that, have never acted before. And I was watching The Sopranos recently, and there's one character in that who had never acted before. And you wouldn't assume that. And that's what I mean when I was saying earlier, even though you're not necessarily the greatest actor, you can have a really great director behind you, and that can shape the performance. And I feel like I'm at the stage in my career now where I want to transition from theatre and move more into film, because that's always what I wanted to do. So I don't necessarily feel like I'm a step behind or stuff like that. I like to think this is the moment that I'm in. It's an okay moment. Things aren't going wrong, so it must be pretty good then.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool.
Absolutely. What genre do you want to kind of sow your seed?
So I love thrillers. I don't know why, but I've always liked the idea of doing. So in one film that I've got at the moment, Psychopath, I play Detective Inspector Wayne Morris, and I've made him a Scottish detective. And I'm drawn to, not only do I watch films, I also watch a lot of documentaries and stuff. True crime stories is stuff that I really am into, because that's an organic source that you can kind of put into it. But thrillers are kind of the main thing that I really want to get into, because I think I've always been into action, and like stuff like Star Wars. The Matrix was a massive influence for me. When I was younger, I used to try and perform all of the set pieces that they used to do.
Yeah,
I smashed a few vases as well, but we won't talk about that. And so thrillers are something that really interests me, but also comedy. I think as an actor, I don't want to pigeonhole myself into doing one sort of genre. But comedy, I have a lot of roots in. My dad is really into his comedy and Blackadder, and I don't know if you've heard of Spaced.
Space, is that a sitcom or movie?
It's a sitcom, and it was with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, the guys from Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz.
Yeah, I'm from. Yeah, I love Hot Fuzz. Yeah, and Shaun of the Dead. Yeah, I love both of those movies. Yeah.
Great. So before they did those two movies, they did a sitcom called Spaced, and it was about a group of people just living together, and they were quite a eclectic bunch. And there's a lot of different references that they put in their writing, and my dad and I watched that religiously. Even though there was only 2 seasons, we could reference different parts of it, and we bring that into our own senses of humor. And I think my dad has been a big a big influence on that as well. And I did stand-up comedy when I was in university as well. I studied a module in that. So that's something that I definitely want to get into. But if you ask me this in 30 years, when I'm 40 or whatever, I'd like to think thrillers and comedies are the two things that I'd like to be most renowned for. Or like, you know, people would think, oh, who's somebody good to be in this thriller? Oh, Sear-Myles. Or, you know, this comedy that's quite dark and has got a lot of references, is quite meta. That's what I'd like to go for. The one thing that I would say to younger actors or to people that want to get into acting is you shouldn't limit yourself to one category. And so as an actor, I want to be able to write my own stuff. People like Ricky Gervais, who I studied when I was doing my stand-up comedy, he's managed to write excellent sitcoms and comedies that are just embarrassing to watch, and you don't really want to watch it, but you do because of that very reason. And I think if he can do that out of the ordinary madness of that, then surely anybody else can, especially if you're an actor. If you're an actor, I think you have to have a certain emotional intelligence or a certain empathy to you. And so if you can put that in your writing, you're already putting yourself in each of the characters' positions. So you're not limiting yourself to one specific role. That's the only framework I can work in, because that's very limiting. And if you expand that, it becomes a lot more freeing. So that I'm trying to explore, but hopefully I'll get there at some point.
But Ricky is a special talent, man. I mean,
100%.
he is so special and so gifted. I you know, my personal opinion is people like that are just born. I don't necessarily know if you can learn to be at the level that he's at. He's almost like he's like a Jerry Seinfeld, you know, in his own right. Like certain things or Dave Chappelle, certain people like that, man, it's just difficult. I don't think we're ever going to see anybody else like that.
I hear what you're saying, and I think it is partly true, but I think what a lot of writers draw from is their own experience, and I think you've got to be able to find your own niche, really. I've tried to write really dramatic pieces that are very poetic and emotional, and I find that I can't really do it because I know the intention behind it, and I find it hard to be able to connect with that sort of stuff. And I think to get to that level of Ricky Gervais sort of level and Jerry Seinfeld is difficult, but they got there in their own way. And I always try and look at things that influence me, but not try and copy what they did, because it worked for them. It won't necessarily work for me 100% of the time, but you've got to be willing and brave enough to just try, at least. I mean, I started writing when I was 15, 14, and a lot of my friends might be watching this and they'll groan at me even mentioning this thing that I tried to write. And when I started writing that, it was very difficult. I tried to write it in book form. And when I was trying to write it, I don't know, it was very difficult because I didn't know who I was at that point, and I was trying to kind of manifest this person that I was not being, and it didn't work. I mean, I got 15 chapters in, which I think is quite good. I mean, somebody else would probably say it's kind of, you know, whatever. Yeah. But I'm quite proud of that, and I think that's something that you've got to be able to tap into. Is even though other people might not see it for you, you've got to see it for yourself, and you've got to be proud of what you do and know that it's not going to work. And I think that's something, at least, that we're missing in society right now, is that things that don't work are okay. And you might be feeling a certain way, you might be feeling depressed or anxiety or whatever it is, PTSD. Those feelings are okay. And that's something that, you know, in meditation is really important. I heard somebody say recently that meditation is about understanding your own thoughts and accepting them for what they are and just letting them go. And I think I put a lot of that into my own process, or at least I tried to.